pleasant morning, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Pagkalinga webinar for a cause titled Project Pagbangon, a joint webinar series on education, research, and extension, organized by Pagkalinga community in cooperation with the Philippine Association of Research Managers. So everyone, we are so excited to have you here in our virtual event. And as of 6 o'clock this morning, we have gathered 48,960 pesos of donation, which will all go help fund the medical expenses of our fellow graduate student at the College of Public Affairs and Development here at UPLB. We also would like to thank both our resource speakers for supporting this noble cause. They will not be accepting any professional fees. So their lecture will be on pro bono as part of their public service and in support of Pagkalinga's mission of commitment to communities. So thank you so much, everybody. Welcome again. My name is Kamla Zaira Lavaria, and I will be your MC for this morning. But before we begin, let me remind you to mute your microphones to avoid any interference with our guest speakers. Should you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand later during the open forum for a more intimate interaction with our guest speakers. You may also join the conversation later on when we tell you to do so. Okay, so to formally begin our program, let us call the chairperson of Pagkalinga, Ms. Patricia Ann Medina, for her welcome remarks. Ms. Patricia?
Hi. Can you hear me clearly? Good morning. Thank you, Kamla. Pagkalinga, Meaning to Care, is a movement initiated by SIPAF graduate students taking PhD in Community Development, Extension Education, and Development Studies. We were later joined by several UPLB graduate students who share a common goal to reach out and give communities in need. From April 12 to 30, we facilitated Project Pag-abot, a passion project which was a donation drive to keep healthcare professionals safe from COVID-19 by giving PPEs. And through this project, we have gathered...
I'm sorry, Ms. Pat. I'm sorry, I think we have a feedback on your end.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, but kindly close, if I'm not mistaken, you opened 2 accounts. Kindly close the other one, please.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you po.
There you go. Sorry about that. So we thank Dr. Dizon and Dr. Marasigan for joining us today. And as mentioned by Kamla earlier, it is their free service for all of us. So thank you for sharing your precious time and your expertise with us. And through this webinar episode in particular, we are helping a fellow CPAF student raise funds for his coming kidney transplantation. So we thank you very much for all of your time and your efforts in joining us in this cause. And again, thank you. And may we all learn from Dr. Dizon and Dr. Marasigan. Thank you, Kamla.
Thank you po, Ms. Pat. So as she mentioned, this will help fund the medical expenses of our co-CPAP student. So thank you for joining us with this noble cause. And this morning, joining us today is an amazing superwoman, a seasoned faculty and a scholar, and a visionary in the field of community development. She is our teacher, our mentor, and most of us is her advisee. So she was a researcher for 20 years at the College of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, before she became a professor at the College of Public Affairs and Development. Today, she continues conducting researches related to community-based forestry, social forestry, agrarian reform, and community development while serving the university as as a faculty, and with the designation of Professor 12 and Scientist 3, the highest rank in its accord, mind you. So this morning, she will be talking about conducting social researches during the pandemic, challenges and alternatives. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our first resource speaker, Professor Josefina Dizon. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, everybody. First, let me thank Pagkalinga for this invitation to be one of the speakers this afternoon. Ninenervyos tuloy ako, no? Of course, I heard you said expert. Actually, I'm not an expert, no, in the field, but I thought that this would be a good topic for a webinar for this morning. Okay, so as all of you know, this webinar is for a cause, and of course, the student is very near to my heart because he is my advisee. He is my advisee. So talagang all support ako dito for your webinar this morning. Okay. So without further ado, let me start by sharing my screen. Okay. Okay. So the topic that I'd like to share with you this morning is conducting social research during the pandemic, challenges and alternatives. You know, of course, that COVID-19 was described as the first major pandemic that struck the earth since the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918 to 1919. And this COVID-19 has resulted to lockdowns, movement restrictions, and public health regulations. In fact, experts have coined the term new normal in human interactions. I have here a comparison of the coronavirus infection on February 12, 2021. And this one is on March 12, 2021. So for a span of 1 month, no? So in here, we see that the total confirmed cases actually has increased within the 1 month period. We see an increase of about 10.7 million confirmed cases. And out of these confirmed cases, total deaths actually has increased also. So from February to March, we have about 300,000, no? 300,000 deaths. And the same thing, if we look at the new cases in February, that value increased already to 461 to 50 in March. Okay, So again, we see that the infection is increasing. Unfortunately, or it's not unfortunately, but fortunately, actually, we have noted a decrease in the new deaths. At least that's a good news, no? The number of deaths has been decreasing. I really don't know the exact data now at this moment, no, but we know, of course, that in the last week, if we hear or if we watch TV or hear news, the number of cases has been increasing. In fact, others would say that we are now in the second wave of the infection. Well, others do not believe the same way. So there are actually two school of thoughts on this. One saying that we are now in the second wave, others do not believe that. But nevertheless, I think the reality is that, you know, the infection is increasing. And that pandemic actually has affected all facets of the human life, our economic aspect, the socio-cultural aspect, even the political and the environmental aspect of human life. All of these have been affected by the pandemic. Even, of course, here in the academe at UPLB, for instance, where we have the trilogy of functions, which are teaching, research, and public service, all these have been greatly affected by the pandemic. For instance, the way we conduct classes, no. So you see here the pictures that I took in the classes that I conduct prior to pandemic. I think this is our CED 250 class. So we had a lot of class interactions when we met during our classes. But nowadays, you know, when we conduct classes online, whether we like it or not, indeed, these interactions have been diminished. We are actually confined in our rooms, and then we only interact via Zoom. And even this particular class, which is CED 252, Planning and Administration of Community Development, one of the final outputs, you know this, no? Those of you who were my students, the final output of this class is a participatory community development plan. So by the name itself, what we do here is we go to the community and do participatory planning with the members of the community. Nowadays, I think for the last two semesters, we have not gone to the community and do participatory planning. So I have to look for ways by which the students can learn participatory planning, even if we do not go to the community. Again, on the impacts on the academe, particularly research, no? Actually, Dr. Jeff Sachs from the Washington University, and who is also the chair of the American Psychological Association Board of Scientific Affairs, he said that the research that will be affected first are studies that involve bringing groups of people together in close proximity. So if you think of what kind of research are these, so definitely I cannot help but think about social research, no? And this is because by the nature of social research, we know, of course, that when we do social research, we cannot help but interact with the people or interact with our subjects or with our respondents. So let us first look at the nature of social research according to Walter. Social research, according to Walter, is the systematic study of society, the patterns in it, and the processes that shape what people do. Second, social research is about investigating and seeking answers to social questions that we and others ask about our social world. Third, social research is research on and with real people in the real world, one of social research's exciting elements. And lastly, social research involves direct communication with the research respondent. So from this nature of social research, we really cannot help, but when we do it, we go to the community, we go to where our respondents are. However, with the lockdowns, social or physical distancing, and other public health requirements, it is believed that field research with human subjects is likely not possible under the circumstances of the pandemic. Hence, conducting social research during the pandemic is a big challenge. So if you are a researcher or if you're a student who is contemplating to do your research, your thesis or your dissertation during this pandemic, you should concern yourself with this question. How should compliance with public health regulations as well as social distance norms factor into your research design, initiation, or execution? So that's a big question that you have to address if you really want to proceed with your social research during the pandemic. Hence, for researchers who have to conduct their study amidst the pandemic, what are the possible options or alternatives? But before we go to that, let us just look at the components of a good social research. According to Walter, there should be an important social question. So most social research have this, no? An important social question. Second, a well thought out and theoretically informed research design. Third, the use and rigorous application of appropriate research methods. Fourth, valid analysis and interpretation. And five, broad dissemination of results and findings. I found a very good literature by Wells who gives the following pieces of advice in doing social research during the pandemic. She said that one way to do research during the pandemic is adapting the data collection processes, okay? While doing research face-to-face allows for the collection of more complex information, however, with the inability to do this during the pandemic, researchers may opt to gather data remotely. Again, researchers may opt to gather data remotely. So, from the sample-based household surveys, which we are used to, we have been doing this prior to pandemic, we might shift already to phone surveys or self-administered online surveys. Okay, to proceed, again, Wells said that One way by which we can adapt data collection processes is to have a lean design, okay? She said, and I quote, "We will have to think a lot more strategically about the design and the analysis of the questions we need to be answered. Complex structured questionnaires will need to be adapted significantly to fit within a 15 to 20-minute acceptable time frame for a phone interview." So if you're contemplating to do a phone interview, this is one of the limitations that you have to consider. You are only limited to at most 20 minutes of interview according to Welsh. Another one is you choose the right unit of analysis. One way of making a lean design is you choose the right unit of analysis. So when we say unit of analysis, it is actually the major entity that you are analyzing in your study. So you can either use the individual level as your unit of analysis, your household level, or your community level. While of course, it is very nice to conduct studies at different levels, no? Depending of course on your research. Wells is suggesting that you may think of just, considering just one appropriate unit of analysis for your research. I know, of course, that the unit of analysis depends on a particular research topic, but the point here is you should be able to choose the best or the most appropriate unit of analysis to simplify things or to simplify your research. Related, of course, to the choice of the unit of analysis is the choice of your respondents. So there's no problem with individual research as long as you are able to identify who your respondents are. But when we go to the household level, well, in the Philippines, for instance, more often it is the head of the family who represents the household. So it can be the father if he is the household head, or the mother if is the household head. So whoever is the household head would be the best person to represent the household. Another way by which you can make a lean design, according to Welsh, is you should customize your design. So depending on your topic, depending on the time and your budget, you have to customize your design, okay? And Welsh provided this very good reference on customizing research design. This book is by Dillman et al., which was published in 2014, and it is entitled Internet, Phone, Mail, and Mixed Mode Surveys, the tailored design method, published by John Wiley and Sons Incorporated. Actually, I have not looked at the book, but I believe that this is a good book which you can use as a major reference in customizing your design. Okay, the next step by which we can adapt our data collection processes is the shift, okay? The shift from face-to-face to remote technologies. Of course, prior to pandemic, we are very used to conducting research using the face-to-face methods. But as I said a while ago, during the pandemic, this may not be possible anymore. It would be very risky on your part as the researcher, as well as, of course, on the part of your respondents. So Wells said that, and I quote, "We will have to shift from face-to-face to remote technologies where mixed methods will remain a key." Okay. So there are types, no? There are types of, several types of remote technologies that we can use. So we have the telephone, we have the cell phone, we have also what we call the computer-assisted internet interviewing. So also the computer-assisted telephone interviewing. These are all examples of remote technologies that we can use of when we gather data remotely. And Welch again provided some helpful references when we try to shift from face-to-face research to making use of remote technologies. One of the references she is suggesting is by Subugi. This was published in 2016 and it is entitled "Utilizing Smartphones to Study Disadvantaged and Hard to Reach Groups." So it is indeed a social research. And this is published in the Social Methods and Research Journal. I have taken note of the link. So if you just click this link, it will direct you to the journal. I tried to look at the journal. Unfortunately, my Open Athens account has already expired, so I cannot access the journal. But those of you who have your Open Athens account, you can easily access the journal and read this article about the use of smartphones. Another helpful reference is by Mahfoud et al. And this is entitled "Cell Phone and Face-to-Face Interview Responses in Population-Based Surveys. How do they compare?" So this one gives you a good comparison of the cell phone survey and the face-to-face survey. So this one is published in the Journal of Field Methods. And again, I give you the link. Hopefully you can go to this article and read through about the methodology. And then I think this is the third reference is by Dutwin and Busker published in 2017. This again is an article comparing data quality of non-probability internet samples to low response rate probability samples published in Public Opinion Quarterly. Again, the link is here. One of the more common or most common remote technology that we use is the phone survey. I do not know if you have done this, done the phone survey even prior to the pandemic. But it is suggested that during this pandemic, as a remote data gathering methodology, phone survey will be very fine. Well, the phone survey, according to Wells, is cheaper than the face-to-face surveys. And I'd like to think that that is true. First, you do not have to go to the community, where you're going to conduct the survey, and therefore you save on a lot of costs, transportation, miscellaneous costs, and so forth, and so on. But just like the face-to-face surveys, the phone survey required trained interviewers. when in the past, when we were doing our face-to-face surveys, of course, we train our interviewers, or we call them enumerators. No, we call them enumerators. We train them before they do the interview. In the same way, when you do the phone survey, if you have some staff to do this for you, you have to train them also. And then, of course, this one, another very important characteristic of phone survey is the limited time. As I mentioned a while ago, you are only limited, according to the expert, no? You're only limited to 15 to 20 minutes phone interview. So the time is really very limited. Unlike, of course, in the face-to-face, you can even go as long as 1 hour, no? As long as 1 hour interview. But with phone survey, it's a no-no. It's at most, it should be only 20 minutes, according to the expert. There are a lot of considerations in the use of remote technologies. One is your prospective respondents' ownership of mobile phones, definitely. Because if you're doing a phone survey, then they have to have a gadget to do that. Here, I'd like to share with you the information on smartphone penetration as share of Philippine population from 2017 to 2025. So data for 2017, 2018, 2019 are actual data, while data for 2020 and 2025 are projections, okay? But you can see that based on the actual data and on the projections, the number of individuals in the Philippines who own a smartphone continues to increase. So this is a good news for us if, if we really want to shift our methodology to remote, methodology using, for example, smartphone. So for 2020, for instance, it says here that about 64%, about 64% of the Philippine population already owns a smartphone. And that is a big increase from the 2019 data, which is about 57%. Okay, so this is good news for us in the Philippines. And if we're going to compare how we fare with the world data on ownership of smartphones, I have these two data to share with you. This is from the world www.statista.com, which says that the number of smartphone users worldwide surpasses 3 billion starting 2019. So note that in 2019, there are about 3.2 billion people in the world who have already cell phones. And is forecast to grow further, so that by 2021, they say that it's already 3.8 billion, okay? And according to statistics, China, India, and the United States are topping the list, each surpassing the 100 million user mark. And if we may compare, let us, for example, data in 2020, worldwide data in 2020 is 3.5 billion people have already smartphone, okay? And if the population of the world in 2020, according to the statistics, is about 7.8 billion, no? 7.8 billion. So if we divide 3.5 billion over 7.8 billion, that gives a percentage of 44.8 billion, or let's say 45 billion. I know it's not 45%, I mean. And if we compare that with the Philippine data, which says that it's about 64% already in 2020. So if we compare cell phone ownership or smartphone ownership in the Philippines, it is really much higher than the world data, okay? So yun, that's how we fare as far as smartphone ownership is concerned. Okay, we proceed on some considerations in the use of remote technologies. Gender, according to Wells, another consideration is gender, no? So in her report, she said that, or in her study, she found out that men report smartphone ownership at markedly higher rates than women in many countries. Okay, so this is the general trend that she saw. In situations in which women own or have access to phones, male members of their household often restrict or exert control over their phone usage. So this is quite sad, no? This is quite sad that in some, maybe in some countries, this happens, but I think in the Philippines, this is not happening. I do not know if you believe so. But this is one factor that you may consider if you're going to make use of remote technologies as far as ownership and use of a cell phone. There is somehow a difference in terms of gender or in terms of sex, men versus women. Another is the location of your study site. Is your site located in an urban area or is it located in a rural area? In a survey conducted by the Human Commissioner of Refugees, wherein they surveyed 44 countries in 4 continents in 2015, they found out that 68% of refugee households in urban locations had an internet-capable mobile phone compared to 22% only in rural areas. Okay, so this data show the discrepancy of ownership of cell phone data between urban and rural areas. So a while ago, we talked about gender. This time, it's about urban and rural areas. So what we're saying now is that you have to have a good idea of your study site or the respondents that will participate in your study. These are the points of this data that I'm presenting to you. In the Philippines, internet connectivity is absent in many rural areas, especially in the coastal areas of major island groups in the Visayas and Mindanao. Well, this is according to media landscape. So we hope that, you know, this condition will improve to time as we see an increasing number, especially so that that we have this later on. I will discuss about the Republic Act. Okay, So we come again to another consideration in the use of remote technology. This time it has something to do with the education or the educational level of your respondents. Welsh in her study said, if we are looking to conduct representative samples in an area with minority populations, it is quite possible that literacy levels can skew the response, which means that indeed education has some or can affect, no, can affect the response that you may get if you use remote technologies. Well, simply because the familiarity with the use of the technology, this implies, of course, is or depends on the educational or the ability to use the technology depends on the educational level of the respondent. Connectivity, of course, is a very important consideration when you're going to make use of remote technologies. Availability of free Wi-Fi internet hotspots. This is the Republic Act that I was telling you about a while ago. So in the Philippines, we have Republic Act number 10929, which establishes the free internet access program in public places in the country and appropriating funds therefore. So this was signed into law on August 3, 2017. I just do not know the extent of the implementation of this Republic Act. So that my advice to you, is to know well your study site, see whether this Republic Act has been implemented already in your study site, and if it is so, then people in the community or people in your study site may already have access to internet connection, because these are provided in the public places. Well, another one is cost of mobile data plans. Okay, so if you do not have an internet connection and you just rely on your mobile data plans, then it should be also considered, no? So the study by Wells, she pointed out that every month, around 1/3 of smartphone users in Manila, this is in Manila, do not use messaging apps over a certain period of time because they have spent all their mobile data allowance already. So kumbaga naubos na. They have already spent their mobile data allowance. So that again, this is a consideration if you're going to make use of remote technology, like making use of smartphone. So what if what if your respondents, well, they have the phone, but they do not have the internet connectivity, and therefore they just depend on their mobile data, which of course means additional budget on their part. Okay, so this is now the third way by which we can adapt our data collection processes. Wells term it as focusing on community engagement. Phone surveys or SMS surveys, text apps are likely to be much more effective when tapping into local community structures. Okay, so I think you should know if there are existing local community structures in your study site. For example, I am a member of this student. She is an MS student in human ecology, and she's doing a survey now. She's doing her thesis now, and it's on an online survey of readiness to change dietary behaviors among adult women with non-communicable diseases in Parañaque City, Philippines. So what she did is she tried to determine whether there are existing community structures in her study site, and indeed she found out that there are existing Facebook groups, no, in the barangay in her study site, and therefore she is making use of these Facebook groups in conducting her online survey. Okay, so I'm running out of time, so I'll make this time much faster. So let's now try to look in details the online interviews. Okay, so of course when we say remote data gathering techniques, one very famous technique is the online interviews. So the reference I was able to find is this one by Lapton, which was published in 2020. This is entitled Doing Fieldwork in a Pandemic. Okay, so it is available at this link. Okay, so if you are interested, there are a lot of strategies that are mentioned in the book. Okay, so if you're interested, you just go to this link and read this very important reference. In that book, an online interview is defined as a structured conversation consisting of the question set, an interviewer, an interviewee, and the technology used to conduct and record the interview. That's how online interview was defined in that book. Sorry. Na-click. Okay, so there are two types of conducting online interviews. One is synchronously. We are very familiar with that. We're using that now in the online classes. And the other one is the asynchronously, okay? When we say synchronously, this is done by mobile phone or laptop using audiovisual interfaces such as Skype or Zoom or by text chat. So this is synchronously because there is a live interaction between the interviewer and the interviewee. Okay, so the asynchronously, this is interviewing by email, for example, which may be more efficient to some, but lacks the live interaction between the interviewer and the respondent. So you can actually do online interview via email. Yun nga lang, there is no interaction, unlike in the synchronous, in the asynchronous type, okay? So these are the two types of online interviews, according to the author. And there are tips, okay? The book gives some tips on designing questions for online interviews. Number one is you should start from an easy opening question. Pampagana, okay? That draws on the expert knowledge or life experience of the interviewee and is relevant to the scope of the interview that you are going to do. Okay, so an easy question that will, lighten up the mood, no? Lighten up the mood of the interviewee. But of course, this easy question should also relate to her knowledge or experience on the topic that you're going to discuss about in the interview. Second is work up to more complex questions, okay? And go out with a meaningful yet feel-good question that allows your participant to say what they think. So from easy, simple questions, you can now follow them up with the more complex but clearly stated questions. Third, be sure to ask the key questions that you want insights that focus on participants' opinion and experience, which of course means that, before you begin the interview, you have already the lineup of questions that you want to ask from your interviewee. And fourth, make sure questions are simple, clear, relevant, and direct to the point. Remember, you are only limited to 20 minutes interview if you are using the smartphone. But with the asynchronously like email, then the time limit may not be a concern for you. But for the live interview, for the synchronous, the time limitation is indeed a consideration. Now, setting up an online interview. How do you set up an online interview? First, is you plan the approach of the interview. How will you do your interview? What are the things that you have to prepare? So this is planning, no? Planning the interview. And when we say planning, of course, that is done in advance, no? So when you start the interview, everything is already set there, okay? Second, you have to coordinate with the interviewee and determine the availability and the time of interview. So before the interview, you have to coordinate with the interviewee and settle the schedule, etc. And then this, I think number 3 is very important. This is test the technology that will be used. Kasi baka during the interview magkakaroon ng problem. There will be some problems with the technology, so that when that comes, you have a what do you call that? You know what to do. You know what to do because you already practiced, no? Or you already tested the technology. Next, doing the interview. This is the next step, doing the interview. First, you have to consider the set and the setting. Definitely, you need a quiet place to conduct the online interview. Of course, you do not want to be bothered by the noise, so you have to select a good place where you can conduct your interview, your online interview. Capturing what is said. So you have to capture the interview. And of course, this is done by recording, by recording. So if you're using the Zoom, well, you can record that, But it is suggested that you should also have your pen and notepad. Why? This will be your backup just in case something goes wrong with the recording. So you have a backup, okay? And this one, the interview length, as I said, 20 minutes at the most, according to experts. What about the flow of interview? The flow, how will you proceed with the interview? Well, you have to start definitely with your introduction. Start by using a short summary statement to state what the interview is about, and ask the participant if he or she is comfortable to proceed with the interview. Prior to the interview, you should have informed the interviewee about the basic information and confirming interview length, style of questions, and location. So these are very important things that you should do before doing. This is prior to the interview. So your respondent should be knowledgeable about the basic information that will be discussed, and he or she should know how long the interview will be. During the interview, so you ask the first question and listen to what the interviewee has to say. No, this interview is about his or her opinion rather than your own opinion. So listening is the key. So you really have to listen to what your interview is saying. Ask for clarification of anything that has been said that you don't understand or would like to know more about. So it's okay to ask for clarification rather than, you know, you do not know what has been said. Next, if the interviewee goes off track, kasi merong ganyan, no? So some interviewees, of course, would be very kind to provide you a lot of information such that medyo sometimes off track na, politely, politely bring him or her back to the question at hand and keep the time in mind. And then last one, summarize the ideas that have been shared with you to indicate that you have understood what has been said. So this is very important that, you know, after what has been said, you summarize. So this means that you really have understood what was given, what information was given to you. Now, closing the interview. So how will you close the interview? When you've asked your last question, ask the interviewee if there is anything more he or she would like to add, okay? Then when you have finished the conversation, thank the interviewee for his, her time and let him, her know what you will do with the information which has been provided to you. Dapat alam din niya or he or she has an idea for what is the information that has been provided. Getting consent, I think this is a very important concern. Even during, before the pandemic, when we do the face-to-face survey, we make it a point that the first page, you know, the first page of our questionnaire has this, that has this consent of the interviewee, no? So obtain permission from your interviewee to use the content of the interview in your report or in your thesis or in your dissertation. You can get this by providing a short one-pager summarizing the interview and containing a line in it with the interviewee's name and something that says like this, I quote, "I consent to the information I have provided in this interview being used for assessment purposes," and a place for their signature and date. But of course, you will always tell them that, you know, they will be anonymous, you know, when you present already your data, their names, of course, will not be mentioned, no? But it is important that you get the consent, the written consent, that you're going to make use of the information that was given to you. Okay, this is the last part of the lecture. It's about my time. It's already 10 o'clock. Online surveys, no? Online surveys. An online survey is a questionnaire that target audience can complete over the internet. I think you are very familiar with online survey. Online surveys are usually created as web forms with a database to store the answers and statistical software to provide analytics. There are advantages of using the online surveys, okay? They say that, you know, this smartsurvey.com says that it is faster, okay, when you do the online survey. Completion time of an online survey project is on average 2/3 shorter than that of traditional research methods. Like when you do the face-to-face, give the questionnaire will be encoded, the data in the questionnaire will be encoded and analyzed, etc. Okay, if you do it using the online survey, it is much faster because the data is already encoded there. The data is already there. Okay, and therefore we go to number 2. It is much cheaper. Time and resources to enter the information into a database did not be allocated because, the respondent directly inputs the answer into the database, okay? It is more accurate. The margin of error is greatly reduced with online surveys because participants enter their responses directly into the system. Hindi yung, di ba, when we use the questionnaire, the respondent, the answers are on the questionnaires, and then the encoder will have to encode that pa, and somewhere along the line, there might be some errors in the encoding, of course, human errors. And then it is quick to analyze because the results are already in a database, no? So anytime that you want the data to be analyzed, it's there. Easy to use for participants. With an online survey, participants can pick a moment that suits them best. Kumbaga, they will do the survey on their own time, okay? Unlike in the online interview, when you set the interview to be at this time, they have to be there, okay? And the time needed to complete the survey is much shorter. Easy to use for researchers because data are instantly available and can easily be transferred into a specialized statistical software if more detailed analysis is needed. Easy to style, okay? Well, you can customize your backgrounds, your images, your logo, etc. And they say it is more honest. You get more honest questions with online survey. Participants prefer to complete online surveys rather than take part in written questionnaires or telephone interviews, and usually provide longer and more detailed answers in the online survey. In the telephone interview, you are limited by time. You only have 20 minutes. But in the online survey, they have more time to do that. Next, more selective. You can pre-screen your participants and allow only those who match your target profile to complete the survey. Then more flexible, the order of the questions in an online survey can be changed or questions can be skipped altogether depending on the answer to a previous question. Okay, however, despite the many advantages of online surveys, there are also disadvantages. And one of those is the lack of interviewer. Okay, nobody, of course, is doing the interview. Since there is no interviewer, the respondent can avoid certain questions or misunderstand them. Okay, they would skip some questions that they would not like to answer. Although, of course, in the face-to-face, you can easily see that, you can go by number and then ask the question, and therefore you can have a complete answer because you have there the interviewer. And then limited access. So to participate in online survey requires a computer, telephone, or smartphone with internet connection. Hence, the survey may only access a determined socio-demographic user profile. So, limited only to some who really have the capability, like they have the gadget, they have the internet, etc. Now, on my concluding remarks, so the inability to conduct face-to-face data gathering during the pandemic is an impetus to gather data remotely. I think that is the advice, no? However, when gathering data remotely, there is a need to adapt the methodology by using a lean design, making use of remote technologies, and focusing on community engagement. Common remote data gathering tools are the online interviews and online surveys, both of which follow some basic guidelines. And the choice of the remote technology to use depends on the technology that is available to the researcher and of course the characteristics of the respondents or of the study site. So these are the reference I use for this lecture. All images used in the lecture were downloaded from the internet. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for attending this webinar for a cause. Stop share na.
Yes po, Doc.
Stop
Thank
share.
you so much, Ma'am Jopay. Well, it's always a delight to have you here. So thank you for giving us like a glimpse on the alternative methods on research during the time of pandemic. Surely there are advantages and disadvantages, but I guess one of the major takeaways that I got from this talk is that you have to do your research anyway. So
Yeah.
para po ito sa ating lahat. Okay, so we would like to remind our participants that our open forum will begin shortly. If you have questions, you may type them in the chat box, or if you wish to join the conversation, you may simply click the raise hand button and we will acknowledge you for you to ask your questions personally. So also, we also would like to remind everyone that this is a safe place and make sure that our comments and questions are healthy and constructive for everybody. Okay, thank you so much. We have approximately 15 minutes and we have gathered some questions in the chat box. So first, I
Okay.
guess this is Ma'am Jopay with regards to protocols po.
Mm-hmm.
Okay po.
In doing research during the
Yes po.
pandemic.
Yes
Okay.
po, ma'am. So this is from Miss Maria Estela Nashon. Good day, ma'am. In interviewing respondents from a community via virtual mode, will this
Mm-hmm.
also require securing permits from the local authorities po?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, even before you conduct your virtual data gathering, I think you should have some protocols already, no? Like what we do during before the pandemic, when we go to the community, we inform particularly the barangay captain or whoever is in charge there that we are conducting a research and the research is about this, no? So I do believe that even you do it virtually, you have to do some protocols like informing the leaders in the community that there is a research that is ongoing. However, this is not face-to-face, but it's more virtual. I think it also applies. It also applies.
Mm. Okay po. So maybe this is also in the form of letter,
Yeah.
request letter.
Actually,
Yes, ma'am.
we ano no, 'di ba? We write letter and if it is possible, just to know who is the researcher is, knowing the researcher of course is very important also. So pakita mo yung face mo.
Okay po.
But there are ano naman like for example, when you go to the for example the barangay captain, you make sure that you wear your face mask, your face shields, you know the distancing, and then you limit the time of exposure. What is important is they know the face behind the research that is being conducted among the members of their community.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Another question from uh, Idol Vida at up.edu.ph. So she said, thank you for sharing your expertise, Ma'am Jopay. If my unit of analysis is rice farming community, how can I go about with my data collection po? So I think this is tweaking her methodology.
Yeah.
She said, I originally designed my data collection to be FGDs and KIIs. So
Mm-hmm.
also considering the challenge of internet access and connectivity and weak telephone signal in these particular rural communities.
Okay, so if your level of analysis is the community, then you should be able to select appropriate respondents who will be able to represent the community. And your perspective is at the community perspective. Okay. not individual, not household, but the community for perspective. So, well, I think it's okay to use the FGD. So the FGD, of course, you can practice their distancing, no, physical distancing. You can also limit the number of your participants. In fact, when you say FGD, it goes around 8 to 10 respondents. I think the biggest number would be 12. So you can also do that. You can also do that, but be sure that well, there is you get the consent of those who will be members of the FGD, and that you make sure that you limit the size of your participants, and you use the face mask, the protocol, the face mask, the face shields, alcohols, etc. So the safety measures should still be there.
Yes, and probably just to add, maybe we can consult on the different guidelines as imposed by different municipalities.
Correct. Correct. That is very true. You have to know what are the protocols that are being imposed in a particular community, because this may differ from one area to another. So that this is what I said, that you should know your area, your study area, especially now that there is a pandemic. What are the protocols that you have to follow? Okay, that you have to follow, just in case you're going to do this face-to-face data gathering, maybe using KII or FGD, no, but not a community meeting, no, not a community meeting wherein you exceed the number of people that is allowed.
Okay. Another one from Miss Pam Aklan. Dr.
Mhm.
Dizon, where do we go or consult for ethical considerations on researches to be done using a self-administered online questionnaire?
Where do you go?
Uh, yes,
I
ma'am.
mean, what
If she's planning to use online questionnaire as her method,
mhm,
where
mhm.
she was
Well,
asking
I
where should
think,
we go for ethical
I
consideration.
think it depends also on the topic that one is going to do as a research, because there are certain questions that need the clearance from the ethics board. So I think you can consult the ethics board whether this kind of questions are allowed for online surveys.
Thank you, ma'am. Also, we would like to remind everybody, should you wish to join the conversation, if you want to ask a live question, you may just simply raise your hand, and
Uh,
you can talk to our resource person.
she has a chat there, like ethics board, where when we did one of the studies, one of the research that we did, we were asked to ask clearance from the ethics board, and I think we got that from the Manila office. Pam, I know Pam, of course. I can give you the address, Pam, whom to contact with regard to the ethics board. I think the UPLB has also established its we call it ethics committee, I think. And we have that already here in UPLB, PAM. So if you're going to ask about your thesis, then you can consult that. I have the names of the members of the ethics board. I just don't have it right now, but Pam, I can email you the names.
Okay,
Here
po.
at UPLB, here at UPLB.
Okay, po. So this is an interesting question from Miss Fresh Till. Okay, thank you for this webinar on social science research, Dr. Dizon and the organizers. I would like to solicit your views on virtual observations as a complement to online interviews. I guess she is asking about doing a face-to-face interview as opposed to online interview. How would you get like the nuances of your interviewees? I think she's referring to
Uh,
that.
well, she was asking about the virtual observation. Of course, when you do the online interview, it's very limited, no? Unlike unlike if you are there actually in the site, you can
Yeah.
do the actual observation of the area of the community that you are studying, and even the actions and the reactions, body movements of your respondents, you can actually observe them actually in real time. But I think with online interview, it's very difficult to do that. Like for example, if you do an online interview using the Skype or the Zoom, then most likely you are just in one room, no? So you are very limited. So you cannot do so much virtual observation of your study area.
Yes, I agree, ma'am. And I think it's also one of my concerns. Probably on a personal note, how do you parang how would you reassure that you got the integrity of your data if you will
With
do on the integrity of the data if you are
with
going to
online.
do online FGD, ma'am? Yes, ma'am.
Well, first, of course, you will select your participants, di ba? In the FGD. So, how do we select our participants in the FGD? Di ba? In our class, we said that, the participants of your FGD would be the most knowledgeable people about the topic. So there are people who are credible, di ba? They are people who are credible by, or well respected in the community. So if you select carefully the participants of your FGD, then I think your data would be safe. And then of course you can triangulate it, no? Triangulate it, like for example the result of your FGD, you can do your KII through online interview also. And of course you can, as we said, you can make use also of secondary data. You can also try to research about the topic.
Okay po. Probably we can entertain one or two more questions before we end the first session. Dr. Dizon, this is in relation to the question on ethic clearance or permit. For UPLB, is it
Mhm.
already embedded in the process of conduct of theses or dissertations to secure clearance from the UPLB Ethics Board?
That's what I know. That
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it depends on your topic actually, no. It depends on you. It depends on your problem. But I think they've been working on that thesis and their dissertations should pass through the ethics committee.
So it's part of
Di
the
ba?
process. Yes po. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. And
Pero,
even
pero
before,
yeah, but I do not know to what extent they have implemented that, especially now that the pandemic, no. But as far as I'm concerned, I have some thesis, what do you call that, thesis outlines or thesis proposals for approval, and they only go to the CTTE and
mhm.
OVCRE. I haven't seen yet, the endorsement from the ethics committee. So maybe it really depends on the research. Okay.
Ayan, okay po. Thank you so much, ma'am. Parang meron po tayo ditong phone-in question from
Phone in.
Mr. Junard. But I think natabunan na po siya sa chat box. Sir Junard, would you like to raise your question live? Kasi hindi ko na po siya makita. Are you there, Sir Junard? Ayan, and a comment from Miss Fresh Steel. So thank you daw po. At least alam niya na hindi siya nag-iisa. So of course, yes po, we go under similar situations during the pandemic.
Okay.
Mr. Junard, are you there po? Would you like to raise your question live? Hindi ko na lang po siya makita sa taas kasi natabunan na.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I got it here. So according to Sir Junar Duterte, can we reach out our IP participants this time via face-to-face, provided that we follow safety protocols and observe proper documentation or permission from NCIP? Or
Well, I'd like to say yes, but that is very conditional. It really depends on the situation. For example, if the area is known not to be COVID infested or affected, why not? But if the area belongs to a critical area in the sense that there are a lot of cases there, baka it would be difficult. So maybe even our IP communities would not allow you, So you really have to discuss this very well with the NCIP, because the NCIP knows maybe information about communities that you would like to work with. So my answer is very what do you call that, conditional. Very conditional, because I
yes,
really do not know the situation where you would like to do your research. So it's really up for the researcher to know very well the condition of the research site, because that is supposedly your role, that is your responsibility. Okay.
yes, and we also have to be mindful, no? Kasi we are also coming from another municipality. So
Correct.
we don't want to be a threat to
Correct.
our respondents. Thank
Yes,
you so
correct.
much, Ma'am Jopay. It's
Yeah,
really a
you are
pleasure to have you.
welcome.
Of course, Ma'am Jopay will be joining us until the end of this webinar. But
Sure.
yes, ma'am. But on this note, we now go to the second part of our webinar. May I have the pleasure to introduce our second resource person to talk about the overview and basic approaches to grounded theory. She is known for her dedication and passion in teaching, research, and public service, which equipped her with competence that make her an accomplished educator in various areas such as social studies, sociology, indigenous education, and agricultural education. She obtained her Bachelor of Arts in Sociology cum laude and her Master of Management major in Development Management from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. In 2007, she attended the Teacher Training Program for Social Studies at Hiroshima University in Japan under the Monbuka Gakusho Scholarship. So she earned her Doctor of Philosophy in Education, major in Social Studies from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, where she was as a recipient of the Academic Excellence Award and the Outstanding Dissertation Award. Friends, let us welcome our second resource person, Dr. Sherry B. Marasigan. A virtual round of applause, please.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll just share my screen. Wait lang po. From time to time, you'll be hearing the roosters crowing, no? As a background, I'm at home. So with the pandemic, I've been very conscious of what is happening around me, and I've learned na every morning at around this time, the roosters start to crow. Anyway, so as mentioned also by Dr. Dizon earlier, when this group Pagkalinga approached me to share something, when they invited me to be part of this webinar series, I really did not hesitate to be involved, because the recipient of this webinar is also a student, my student in one of the courses that I handled. So when they asked me what topic I wanted to discuss, so I just told them maybe I can give a brief overview of what grounded theory is. So I gave my presentation, the title, Getting Grounded, with the grounded theory, an overview of the basic approaches. So actually what I will be sharing with you, if you have been reading a lot about grounded theory, there's nothing really, maybe I will just be emphasizing more of some points, but this is really just an overview of the basic approaches on grounded theory. So let me just ask you, whenever I have a seminar actually on a face-to-face, or whenever I have a lecture or talk, I always engage my audience, no, in the discussion. So may I ask some of the members of the organizing committee so that I could be hearing other voices. Now, it's very difficult to be presenting a lecture or a talk in front of a laptop, in front of a computer, when you feel that everybody's muted. No, it's very hard to discuss, no? like as if no one is listening. So may I ask some of the members of the organizing committee? So when you hear grounded theory, what is it? No, what comes to your mind, or what is your understanding of a grounded theory? Are the organizers here? May I ask maybe yung pinakamakulit sa akin, Miss Ruby Risa, are you there? Ayaw na nilang umimik. Miss Ruby, are you there? Ayaw nila. Miss Patricia, are you there? No one would want to respond in my question. So later I'll be asking you. So maybe you would want to ponder upon what usually comes into your mind though when you hear what grounded theory is. So basically, as what the title says, okay, si Mr. John Leonard Pabalen raised his hand. Sige nga, Mr. John Leonard. You raised your hand. You want to say something? Maybe you would want to answer the question I posed.
Ma'am Shari?
Yes. Ruby, are you there?
Ayan po, di pa ako makapag-unmute kanina kaya hindi pa makasagot. Ayan, so based on my recall po.
Napindot lang po, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Miss Ruby.
Ayan po, grounded theory, the theory is grounded in actual data, which means the analysis and the development of theories happens after the collection of the data. And the theories here, the output of the theories that are the output of the grounded theory are called mid-range theories.
Okay, so thank you for the summary, Ruby. Actually, it already summarized, no, the whole talk, no. So as you've mentioned, no, since it's grounded theory, the theory that you generate enables you, that you were able to generate is grounded, no, on the data. So what is very crucial here is your data collection process, no, how you were able to collect the data. So the data plays a central role in the process, no. Okay, so one of the siguro what is beautiful with grounded theory is that it provides a systematic, qualitative procedure to generate a theory that explains at a broad conceptual level a process, an action, or an interaction about a substantive topic. So probably what is later, you'll be hearing a lot about this concept of process, this idea of process, idea of action and interaction. In grounded theory research, this theory is a process theory. As I mentioned, yung concept of process would always be there. It explains an educational process of events, activities, actions, and interactions that occur over a period of time. So medyo action-oriented, no? That's why later I'll be talking about yung verbs that you develop in your categories are all gerund verbs, no? Like ending with ing, because they refer to a particular action or a process. So the grounded theories proceed through a systematic procedures of collecting data. So ito yung the process that it undergoes. As I mentioned, very systematic. It provides a clear view of how you do your procedure. Collecting data, identifying categories, connecting these categories, and forming a theory that explains the process. I think the very essence of why you're doing this, using this method, is that you need to form a data, form a theory that would explain the process. And then, as I mentioned earlier, no, it's the data that takes the center stage to reach a theoretical description of a phenomenon and explaining it. No, that's according to Boe-G in 2010. So, what are the formal aims of a grounded theory? No, so they are to generate an analytic substantive schema through processes of theoretical sensitivity. No, we take note also of the term theoretical sensitivity, which after comparison with other substantive areas can become a formal theory. So these are the terms that I will be using constantly as I go along my presentation, yung idea of process, theoretical sensitivity, comparison. I think dito nag-evolve, dito lang umiikot yung usapin ng grounded theory. So the question probably is, when do you use a grounded theory? As I was listening to Ma'am Jopai's lecture earlier, she presented, no, yung nature of social research, diba? She mentioned about the components of a good social research. So the idea of the importance of the social questions, it has to be a well thought. There has to be a well thought out and theoretically informed research design, the use and rigorous application of appropriate research method, valid analysis and interpretation, and broad dissemination of results and findings. And I think this would all fit, no, when you use a grounded theory as well. So when do you use a grounded theory nga ba? As mentioned earlier by Ruby, the data is you ground yourself with the data, no? So in grounded theory, you generate a theory when existing theories do not address your problem or the participants that you plan to study. So walang theory that would explain, especially that you're looking at an action, no? You're looking at a process. So, and the idea there that because a theory is grounded in the data, it provides, actually, that's the contention, no? It provides a better explanation than a theory that is borrowed off the shelf, no? Because it fits the situation, it actually works in practice, is sensitive to individuals in a setting, and may represent all of the complexities actually found in the process. So, yung idea of having a theory borrowed off the shelf, because that's what we normally do, no? Sa more positive stance of doing research, we tend to, ano bang ginagawa natin? We tend to validate a theory. But in this case, since your theory emanated from your data, is grounded on the data, then it really fits a particular condition. It fits a particular situation. I think another term, no, key term that I will be using most of the time later is the concept of fit, no? So it encompasses the whole condition of a phenomenon. So actually, what is beautiful also with grounded theory is that if you are a beginner, no, in qualitative research, it provides a step-by-step systematic procedure for analyzing data. Kasi meron talaga siyang step-by-step, no, process. So siguro before we go much deeper dun sa grounded theory, let's try to go back muna dun sa history niya, no? Bakit nga ba nag-start? How did grounded theory develop? Who are the popular people, no, that we associate with grounded theory? So it was actually started by Barney Glaser and Anselm Strauss, no, in their pioneering book, The Discovery of Grounded Theory, in 1967. So they worked together. They're both sociologists, no? So they worked together, I think in the University of California in San Francisco, in a medical hospital. They studied about the cases of terminally ill patients, no? So they tried to study the patients in terms of their knowledge about their diseases, about their illness. There were some participants who were accepting that they were already dying, while there were some who tried to understand also still their condition. So since they were trying to study about the participants' experience, no, the patient's experiences, they could not find a particular theory that would explain the condition of these patients. So they came up with an explanation of what they did. So they became very popular with that, no? Medyo radical in terms of the positivist approach of sociology during that time. So they highlighted that the current theory in sociology actually overly stressed verifying and testing theories rather than discovering the concepts or the variables and hypotheses based on the actual field data from participants. So it provided, yun nga sabi ko, medyo radical, no, in terms of coming up with a different methodology and different explanation of a particular phenomenon during that time. So here, no, as I mentioned, yung fit, the term fit would always be present in my discussion. No? So a theory discovered during data collection will fit the situation being researched and will work when put into use. Better than a theory identified before a study begins. Kasi when we do theory verification, usually there's a theory out there, no, that you want to validate, you want to verify, you want to match with the data that you got, no. But in terms of grounded theory, the collected data, from the collected data, a theory is constructed, no, a theory is generated. So it really fits the situation. So actually there are different types of grounded theory designs. And each type is actually associated with a particular, of course, with the particular authors. No? So first is the systematic design. The second is the emerging design. And the third is the constructivist design. So as I have mentioned earlier, there were yung characters ni Barney Glaser and Anselm Strauss, right? But actually, medyo mag-ano lang tayo ng konti. Chismis ng konti, no? Sorry for the term, but medyo there were some falling off in terms of the relationship between, not really falling off, but medyo nag-separate yung in terms of philosophical and may paradigm shift between Barney Glaser and Anselm Strauss. So actually, si Barney Glaser was more on the side of quantitative side. But he worked with some noted researchers na interested in inductive approach, no, to gathering data, both quantitative and qualitative. So that idea of that perspective of induction pushed him to use grounded theory, no? Like looking into the concerns and concerns of the participants. See more on the descriptive statistics, si Barney Glaser, while Anselm Strauss was more on the side of qualitative from the very beginning. He has been exposed to a lot of field researches. So with his field work, he is more in close contact with the participants of a study. So in that process, they agreed at first, no, on coming up with using grounded theory. Now, this systematic design, why is it called systematic? No, of course, because there is a system, no, there is a process on working about this particular type of grounded theory. So it emphasizes the use of data analysis steps of open, axial, and selective coding, and the development of a logic paradigm or a visual picture of the theory generated. Actually, what is highlighted in the systematic design, aside from it being systematic, is that yung output would always have a visual picture of the theory generated. No? Meron siyang framework na nade-develop. So it is associated with the detailed, rigorous procedures that Strauss and Corbin identified. Now you'll see a different character, no? Juliet Corbin is, I think, a community health researcher. and they tandem, no? Strauss and Corbin tandemed on coming up with another version of a grounded theory, leaning towards coming up with predetermined categories in analyzing and coding the data. So for them, ito na yung I've mentioned this already, no? So there's open, there's actual, and there is selective coding. For some other authors, they use initial coding, and then focus coding, and then the theoretical coding. No? So these are the 3 steps. No? The open codes would refer to you, the researcher, coming up with codes based on the actual responses of the participants, and then proceeding towards getting an actual code, an axis, no? A focus code that would encompass all the open codes based on the responses of the participants. And then the selective code actually would be more on the theoretical code, no? The final code that would encompass, that would fit in the situation that you are studying. So the use of these 3 coding procedures means that grounded theories use set procedures to develop their theory. I've mentioned this already. They rely on analyzing their data for specific types of categories in actual coding and use diagrams to present their theories. As I mentioned earlier, no, crucial yung coming up with a visual diagram that would present the theories or the theory that would explain the phenomenon. And then a grounded theory study using this approach, using the systematic approach, might end with hypotheses that make explicit the relationship among categories in the actual coding paradigm. So there is a hypothesis that would show the relationship. That's why I mentioned earlier that one of the products, the outputs, would be a framework probably showing the causes, the consequences, and the possible effect of the interplay of the data or the codes that you have collected or analyzed. Now, the second type of a grounded theory design is the emerging design, from the term emerging, no? So going back to the story of Barney Glaser, Anselm Strauss, and Juliet Corbin, when Strauss and Corbin paired for the systematic design, Glaser actually made a reaction on that systematic design that Corbin and Strauss proposed. So why is that so? Because according to Glaser, the idea of a real grounded theory is that you do not put the codes, you do not put the data in predetermined categories, but you let the theory emerge from the data. No? So according to Glaser, medyo nag-deviate na si Corbin and Strauss dun sa real concept of grounded theorizing. No? But the point naman of the two, Strauss and Corbin, was that it provides a more systematic analysis of the data that you have. So anyway, Glaser stressed the importance of letting a theory emerge from the data rather than using a specific preset categories such as that in the actual coding paradigm. No? Because yun nga, predetermined kasi dun sa systematic design. So for Glaser, the objective of a grounded theory study was for the author to explain a basic social process, diba? So yun nga, as I mentioned, no, yung concept of process would always be part of this lecture, of this discussion. So this explanation of having an emergent design, no, this explanation involved the constant comparative coding procedures of comparing incident to incident, incident to category, and category to category. No? So one of the key characteristics kasi of grounded theory is the constant comparative analysis. No? It is an iterative process. No? So you go back and forth, no? Inductive, deductive, abductive nga, no? To some authors, that's how they describe a grounded theory. So there would always be constant comparison. And that's part of the emerging design. So the focus, according to Glaser, was on connecting categories and emerging theory, and not on simply describing categories. So I think we have to take note of this, no, for those who are trying to work on grounded theory or even any other qualitative research. You are not there to just describe the categories, but you have to connect the categories, no, with the emerging theory. And in the end, the researcher builds a theory and discusses the relationship among categories without reference to a diagram or picture. So as I mentioned earlier, in the systematic design, one of the outputs is to come up with a visual diagram showing the connections of your codes and coming up with the actual code or the focus code. With this, you really discuss the relationship between and among the categories. You build a theory with no picture or diagram. So, yun yung points ng emerging design. So, grounded theory exists at the most abstract conceptual level rather than the least abstract level as found in visual data presentation, such as a coding paradigm. Second, a theory is grounded in the data and it is not forced into categories. Now, I think I've mentioned this already. And a grounded theory must meet 4 central criteria. So what are these? Fit, as I mentioned, yung term na fit would always be part of this discussion. Fit, work, relevance, and modifiability. So, ano yung point? If a grounded theory works, it will explain the variations in behavior of participants. No? So, since you're looking at a particular phenomenon, it fits the condition that you are looking at, then it works, no? Because it is able to explain the variety in the behavior of the participants. Then if it works, then it has relevance. And the theory should not be written in stone and should be modified when a new data arises, no? When a new data emerges. Hindi siya pwedeng ikahon na, okay, this is now the theory that I got. As I mentioned, there are 4 important points, diba? So yung concept of modifiability. Once that you think a theory has already emerged or a new concept has emerged, then you try to look at it in another setting. No? You try to look at it tomorrow, and then probably the data would be giving another information to you, and then you modify. No? That's why the constant comparison is always at work. No? The iteration is always there. Iterative process, I mean. So the third design is the constructivist design. No? So this was espoused by Kathy Sharmas. She was asking, no, maybe she was also tracing the conversation between and among Corbin, Strauss, and Glaser. And then she was asking, so which grounded theory should be followed? No? So when she asked that question, probably she was trying to propose another design. No? So, and that's the constructivist design. So ano yung idea nito? Actually, the constructivist design is more on a philosophical approach. You know? It lies between the more positive stance of Glaser and Strauss and Corbin and some of the postmodern researchers. What is the focus of the constructivist design? It's more on the meanings ascribed by the participants in a study. Here, you take into account the meanings associated or given by the participants of the study. The researcher plays, the role of researcher is highlighted. No? It puts emphasis on the role of the researcher in the study. So Sharmas is more interested in the views, the values, beliefs, feelings, assumptions, and ideologies of individuals than in gathering facts and describing facts. No? So she presented a different take on grounded theory, including the values, beliefs, assumptions of the individuals at play of the research, in the research. So as I mentioned earlier, in a grounded theory procedure, it does not minimize the role of the researcher in the process. No, the biases, the intuitions, the hunches of the researcher is recognized in the grounded theory, no, particularly in a constructivist design by Kathy Charmas. So the researcher actually brings certain questions to the data, no, along with a store of sociological concepts. So aside from the sociological concepts that you have, you still also bring with you several questions pa, no, to the data. So you'd always have to ask your data. You really have to talk to your data. No? Later, I'll be sharing more about talking with your data. No, I've mentioned this already. No, so in a constructivist design, any conclusions developed are just suggestions. No, are suggestive, incomplete, and inconclusive. No, why is that so? Because as I mentioned earlier, like if you're talking to your data now, you park it today, you visit it tomorrow again, it would give you another insight. It would give you another perspective. It would give you another view. I don't know if you could relate to me, no, with me, with what I'm saying. But if you are in close contact with your data, di ba, when you review today, there are times na parang you're staring at your data for 3 hours, and yet nothing would come out of the data. Diba? So what we advise our students is that you park it first, no? You leave it at that, and then you try to relax, and then you try to go back to your data again. And then, voila, no? When you go back to your data, yun nga, no? It would say something new to you, no? And then you visit it again tomorrow, that would offer another explanation or another perspective. So in applying this approach, a grounded theorist explains the feelings of individuals as they experience a phenomenon or process. No? So in the constructivist design, it mentions the beliefs and values of the researcher and avoids predetermined categories such as those found in actual coding. So yung emerging design and the this constructivist design medyo are going against the predetermined categories as espoused by Corbin and Strauss. So the narrative, no, that is to be written, the narrative is written to be more explanatory, more discursive, and more probing of the assumptions and meanings for individuals in the study. No? So yung idea of meanings in the study is there. So now, after learning all the 3 designs, so what would be the best? No? How will you choose among the designs? So here, you need to reflect now as a researcher. No? You go back, of course, you go back to your research question. You go back to your philosophical underpinnings, no? Philosophical worldview. Where are you coming from? So you have to consider several, no? You have to have several considerations, no, in choosing from among the 3. So, ano yun? With the varied approaches to the grounded theory design and the continual emergence of new perspectives, so the readers and the researchers, tayo yun, may become confused and not know which procedures would best produce a well-developed theory. So, anong gagawin natin? When we experience that, no? So if you consider conducting a grounded theory study, so as I mentioned earlier, you need to weigh how strongly you want to emphasize procedures, no? Do you want to use predetermined categories in analysis? Or do you position yourself as a researcher and decide how to end the study? No? So, saan continuum ka ba magpa-fall under? So, what are the key characteristics of a grounded theory research? No? Okay, I think we have to take note of these key characteristics. With these key characteristics, actually, ano na siya, compounded na siya from the three major designs. So first, I've been mentioning earlier, no, about the idea of iteration. So data analysis in grounded theory approach is an iterative process, no? Paulit-ulit, paikot-ikot. Throughout the research, the process of coding and analysis are constantly at work. You do not end with one day coding and then you'll schedule na tomorrow I'll do the analysis. No, you cannot do that because it's really a process. No? So if you're looking at a process, if you're studying a process, then you also go through a process of coding and analyzing. The constant comparison method is the key in the data analysis in the grounded theory approach. So the idea of iteration, the at work yung coding and analysis, and the constant comparison. I think these are the three characteristics of grounded theory. If you try to read any material on grounded theory, these three are the highly emphasized points by almost all authors. Okay, aside from that, so if you're going to look at it, no, so may 6 daw na key characteristics of grounded theory research. First is it is a process approach. Second is the presence of theoretical sampling. Later, I'll be discussing it. Third is the constant comparative data analysis. I think I've been emphasizing that to you already. And then there's the concept of the core category. That would be the key in coming up with the theory. And then, no, as I've mentioned, no, the theory generation and the use of memos. Okay, so let's try to look at these 6 key characteristics, no, one by one. Okay, so when you say process approach, what does it mean? No? Ano ba yung idea ng process approach? So according to Corbin and Strauss, a process in grounded theory research is a sequence of actions and interactions among people and events pertaining to a topic. No, so yun yung that's what you're looking at. No, that's what you're studying. A process. So the categories in grounded theory designs are the themes. No, of basic information identified in the data by the researcher and used to understand a process. Here, the in vivo codes are used. No? So are you familiar with in vivo codes? I know most of you are familiar with the in vivo software for qualitative research. Actually, I think nag-originate siya with this in vivo codes. But what do these in vivo codes mean? These are the actual terms, the actual words used by the participants, no, while you are doing your interview or doing your observation. By the way, when you gather data for grounded theory, it's not just interview, no. You make use of all the possible means to gather data. So in vivo codes is when you already code your data, then you use the actual terms used by the participant. So mas naka, how do you call that? Mas naka-ground sa participants, no? Sorry for the noise, no? Okay. Next, a sample, no? This is just a screenshot of the process and categories within the flow of research in grounded theory, no? From Creswell. So if you look at the flow, so the research problem leads to, next level, a study of a central phenomenon grounded in grounded theory research questions that addresses a process. No, yun yung third. Now, this process contains a sequence of activities, which includes actions of people, which also includes the interactions of people. No? So, with all these things, no, with this process, na grounded theorist begins to understand by, ito na yung proseso na ginagawa niya in coding and analyzing, developing categories, relating each category, and then developing a theory that explains, again, the process that you are looking at. No? So this is the parang flow, no? The process and the categories, no, in grounded theory research design. Now, the second key characteristic of grounded theory is the theoretical sampling. So what do we mean by theoretical sampling? Ano ba yung mga common na alam natin when it comes to sampling? Sampling would always be something to do with the representative, right? Sa statistics, no? Sample of a population. So, ano ba yung mga sampling techniques na ginagawa natin? But in qualitative research, particularly in grounded theory, yung term na ginagamit is the theoretical sampling. So, how do you do that? The grounded theory samples theoretically using a procedure involving the simultaneous and sequential collection and analysis of data. Again, I go back to the idea of iteration and constant comparative. No? You sample, you get samples for your study as you analyze your data. So, kaya nga siya simultaneous and sequential at the same time. So, if you already have a data, for example, a set of interviews, you were able to transcribe a data already. You were able to just transcribe your interviews. And then while you are already coding and analyzing, you'll realize that there are still some data that you need to gather. So, simultaneously, while you are analyzing your data, you will also again collect data. So medyo ano siya, kaya nga siya iterative, medyo in Filipino, makulit siya na proseso. So you really need to have patience in dealing with your data, in analyzing your data, in coding your data. So there will come a point also that while you are coding your data, you'll realize na parang, oh, I think I still need to go back to my interviewees, no? I still need to go back and ask them this question so that I'll be able to generate a better theory, no? that would explain the data that I have. No? So again, the idea of simultaneous and sequential collection and analysis pala, sorry. Simultaneous and sequential collection and analysis of data. So, theoretical sampling in grounded theory means that the researcher chooses forms of data collection that will yield text and images useful in generating a theory. As I mentioned earlier, no? This means that the sampling is intentional and focused on the generation of theory. So, the sampling is purposeful, is intentional, because at the end, ang goal mo is for you to be able to generate a theory that would explain the phenomenon that you are looking at, that would explain the process that you are trying to look into. So beyond sampling data for its theoretical value, the grounded theorists also espouse the idea of using an emerging design. No? What does it mean? The researcher collects data, as I think I've mentioned this already, analyzes it immediately rather than waiting until all data are collected and then bases the decision about what data to collect next on the analysis. Because sometimes what we do, we collect all the data, no? And we announce to people, I'm already done collecting my data. But in grounded theory, you do not wait until all the data are collected, because as you collect your data, you also analyze na nga your data, di ba? And then as you do it, you'll realize that you need to collect more. No? So you decide what other data you need to get so that your analysis will be complete. So because of that, now the grounded theories then returns to the field to gather additional information. I think I've done that before, no? I thought I was already done collecting my data in a particular, I interviewed some teachers And then while I was coding and doing my analysis, parang na-realize ko, wow, I still need to gather more information. So I needed to go back to the school, explain again why I am there, no? Yun lang, medyo tedious siya on that side, especially you're dealing with people na kinukulit natin, we ask permission, we ask favor, no, from them, taking some of their time, and then here you go again, getting another set of information. Because it's not because nag-fail yung instrument but it's more of like you not being able to cover enough for you to be able to explain the theory that you are trying to explain. No? I'm sorry, trying to generate pala. So in this procedure, the researcher refines develops and clarifies the meanings of categories for the theory. So, this process actually weaves back and forth, no? Sabi ko, iteration, paulit-ulit lang po ako dun sa concept ko ng iteration, no? Between data collection and analysis, and it continues until the researcher reaches saturation of a category, no? So, ano yung saturation of a category? It is a state in which the theoretical saturation daw. It is a state in which the researcher makes the subjective, take note of the term, subjective determination that new data will not provide any new information or insights for the developing categories. No? So, it's actually the researcher who determines. No? When I was writing my paper and I was using this GTA, the grounded theory approach, I was also, of course, I've been reading a lot about grounded theory, and I've encountered this concept of saturation of a category. I was also asking myself, how sure I am that I have reached that saturation of category or yung theoretical saturation. Hindi kaya ako lang as a researcher yung nasa-saturate na of looking at the data that I have, or analyzing the data. In Filipino, baka nauuta na ako. I think I assigned someone from the group to translate. No, I think there are some foreigners. I don't know how to translate uta. No, but like you get used to working on your data. So I was also questioning myself. No, and then I think it was Charmas or Corbin and Strauss who said that probably in a research in a grounded theory, yung extreme saturation will really not be accomplished by the researcher, but the researcher could claim that somehow you were able to satisfy the samples that you need to work on. So as long as wala na daw data, yung parang as you still work on your data, you analyze, you code, day in, day out, and then there's no new information or data or emerging concept that comes out, then you could say that you were able to reach that saturation point. Okay, sorry. The fourth, I think this is the fourth key characteristic, the constant comparative analysis. I have been talking about constant comparative analysis also, simula pa kanina. So, the researcher engages in a process of gathering data, sorting it into categories, collecting additional information, and comparing the new information with emerging categories. So it's really a continuous process. Kaya nga, when you decide to use grounded theory, you really have to be patient in doing your analysis, in data coding, data collection, and data analysis. So this process of yun na nga, it's called the constant comparative procedure, yung process of slowly developing categories of information. So according to Corbin and Strauss, the analytic process of comparing different pieces of data for similarities and differences is what constant comparative data analysis is all about. I remembered, I don't know if you've also encountered some comments from people, saying that if you're doing a qualitative research, ay, qualitative ba yung research mo? Putyo-putyo lang naman yan, So there are some comments that I receive, I get comments like that. So of course I would have a violent reaction towards it, especially how I see how rigorous yung qualitative research, But for some, especially for the positivist, who really looks into the step-by-step how do you call that? Step-by-step procedure, itong grounded theory would be a response to that, because it also provides a very rigorous and tedious process of collecting, analyzing your data. Okay, another key characteristic of the grounded theory is the core category related to theory generation, actually, yung idea of core category. So From among the major categories derived from the data, the grounded theory selects a core category as the central phenomenon for the theory. Now, if we go back to the systematic design, no, wherein there is an open code, there is an actual code, and then there is a selective code. No? Yung open code, of course, the open codes will be based on the participants' responses or your observation. And then you proceed to, from the open codes, di maraming open codes mo, you get the focus code. No? What is the focus of, what is the axis of those codes? And then from there, from all the actual codes, you come up with the core category. No? That shall serve as the basis for writing the theory. So that particular core category, ito na ipapasok yung idea natin ng fit, relevance, modifiability, etc., etc. So according to Strauss and Corbin, cited in Creswell in 2011, the core category must be central. No? That is, all the major categories can relate to it. No? It encompasses all the categories. Kaya nga siya core. No? It must appear frequently in the data, no? Meaning with almost all cases, within all or almost cases, there are indicators pointing to that particular concept. The explanation that evolves by relating the categories is logical and consistent, no? That there is no forcing of data, no? So ito yung essence nung core category, no? Three very important points. What else? The name or phrase used to describe the central category should be sufficiently abstract, no? Why? Because it's trying to encompass all the categories, no? All the categories in your research. And as the concept is refined, the theory grows in depth and explanatory power. So your theory has that explanatory power because it is able to cover all the categories, all the data that you have, no? And also, even when conditions vary, magbago-bago man yung condition, the explanation still holds. Although the way in which a phenomenon is expressed might look somewhat different, but still, the explanation holds because, remember, the theory that you were able to generate was grounded in the data that you have. No? So magbago man yung conditions, it still holds true because it came from the data that you collected and analyzed. Okay, the fifth, I think, is a theory generation. A fifth key characteristic of grounded theory is theory generation. So how do you do that? In identifying a core category and the process categories that explain it, grounded theories have generated a middle range theory. As mentioned by Ruby kanina, no? What you develop in, that's why when Ruby term ko talaga recited, no? Defined what grounded theory is. She mentioned about data being grounded, coming up with a theory, but she also mentioned about coming up with a middle range theory, no? Ano ba yung middle range theory versus the grand theories that we have, no? So, mamaya. This theory is an abstract explanation or understanding of a process about a substantive topic grounded in the data. Since the theory is close to the data, it does not have the wide applicability or scope, no? Such as the grand theories. No? So, when you say grounded theory, grand theories, you say it's very big, no? In terms of scope, palawak siya. But in terms of using grounded theory, since middle range nga siya, it's only applicable to the situation that you're looking at. However, it's not naman a minor working hypothesis. The theoretical propositions in grounded theory research are statements indicating the relationship among categories. No? It's very important kasi you're looking at the relationship talaga. That's why you do the constant comparative analysis. You try to check the relationship of one category with another. No? So the theory developed is reference specific, no? It considers everyday world situations, has a specificity, and consequently useful to practice, no? That's why it's called a middle range theory, no? Highlighting yung everyday world situation, very specific, and useful to practice. The last key characteristic of grounded theory is the memoing. It's very important, I think. It's the last, but I think this plays a very important role in grounded theory. Bakit? No? Memo writing is a tool in grounded theory research that provides researchers with an ongoing dialogue with themselves about the emerging theory. That's according to Sharmas. When we do research, kahit anong method yung gamitin natin, we always have our notes, right? Now, in doing grounded theory, memo writing is very important, no? Whatever you do, you always have to have a pen and a paper, no, to write down your hunches, your thoughts, no, whatever comes to your mind that is related to your study, you write it down, no. So memos are notes that the researcher writes throughout the research process to elaborate on ideas about the data in the coded categories. Diba, there are times, as I mentioned earlier, there are times that you're just staring at your data for 3 hours. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I did, no? Like you're staring at your data for the whole morning, and yet nothing is coming out, no? You cannot analyze anything. And then you stop you just stop looking at your data, you try to take a bath, no? And then while you're taking a bath, merong aha moment, diba? May realize, maybe that's what I need to look into. The problem while you're taking a bath, while you're doing your shampoo, no, shampooing your hair, how will you be able to write it down? And then, kunwari, there are a lot of ideas that would pour out, that would come in. No? So, you have to take note of these things, no? Or ano ba, in my case, when is parang may mga aha moments, when I am about to sleep, when I have turned off the lights already, I'm already in bed, and then there's an aha moment, no, na ma-realize mo, I think I need to include this in the analysis. So what will you do? So I always have my cell phone with me, my mobile phone with me. I text myself, no, to write down the memos, and then I keep the text message in my notebook, no, where all my memos are written. No? So I write them down. And I think you also do that, no? So yung mga aha moments are very, very important. So in memos, the researcher explores the hunches, the ideas, and thoughts, no? And then takes them apart, no? So hiwalay mo siya doon. And then always searching for the broader explanations at work in the process, no? So even our hunches, no, are very simple thoughts regarding the data that we have, no, are very, very important. So the memos help direct the researcher toward new sources of data, no? Because yun nga, you take note of what is happening with you, with the data that you have, no? Or even when you're doing your observation, no? As I mentioned, you can make use of a lot of different data collection techniques in grounded theory. So it's not just interview or focus group or whatsoever. When you do observation, direct observation, you take note of what you're observing at, no? So memos help direct the researcher toward new source of data, shape which ideas to develop further, and prevent paralysis from mountains of data, no? It's only true because sometimes when you get bombarded with a lot of data, parang na-overwhelm ka, you tend to become overwhelmed, no? What am I going to do with these tons of data? No, but with the memoing, bit by bit, no, it would prevent from paralysis, no, because you are always at work because of the memos. Okay, so I think I'm on nearing my last slide. So, what are the steps, no, in conducting grounded theory research, no, according to Creswell? Actually, this part, no, it's medyo tricky. When you follow the steps in conducting grounded theory, it goes back to the idea of the systematic design by Strauss and Corbin. So what are these? First, of course, you decide if a grounded theory design is best to address your research problem. No? Again, you go back to the question, ano ba yung research problem mo? Baka you're trying to fit yung grounded theory when in the first place, it's not grounded theory that you need. No? Baka naman there's a theory that would explain your research problem. No? So, second is you identify a process. No? Ano ba yung process that you want to study? Again, as I mentioned earlier, the grounded theory looks at a process, no, at an action or at the interaction. And at the same time, grounded theory entails a process also. No? The iterative process, the constant comparative process. You look at data, parang you compare data to data to incident, data to codes, no, codes to codes, all these things. No, it's really a process. And then, just like what you have been asking Dr. Dizon earlier, no, of course you have to ask approval and access, no, from the participants of your study. Ma'am Jopay also mentioned about of course, you maintain anonymity, especially in doing qualitative research. So anonymity of your participants should always be in place. And then you conduct the theoretical sampling. No? So theoretical sampling, I mentioned earlier, is that sequential and simultaneous collecting and analyzing of your data. No? So up until you are able to obtain the theory that would explain, you come up with a core category that would explain the phenomenon that you're looking at. And then number 5, you code the data. You notice wala dito yung collecting of data, di ba? Yung part na, in what part will you be able to collect the data? Nandun siya sa number 4, no? You collect, and at the same time, you analyze your data. And then, of course, you code the data, and then you use the selective coding and develop the theory. No? I mentioned earlier, following the systematic design by Strauss and Corbin, open codes to actual codes, and then to selective codes or theoretical codes. No? And you validate your theory. How do you validate your theory? You look at your theory, you try to see, does this fit the phenomenon I'm looking at, the process I'm looking at? Is this relevant? No? Yung theory ba nito, core ba siya? Is it a core category? Is it central? Is it abstract enough to cover the participants I looked at, the data that I have, all these things? And then lastly, you write a grounded theory research report. So if you want to have a step-by-step, step-by-step process of doing qualitative research, actually grounded theory provides a good practice, not really practice, a good opportunity for you to do your qualitative research. Kasi especially with a systematic design, there is a system, no, of procedures that you can look into. I think this is my last slide. No, I have another. Yeah, I'll share this with you. Actually, I was supposed to encode it again or type it again. No? When I was writing my dissertation, I was really on the brink of ano ba? Ayoko na, no? Gusto ko nang mag-stop. I really wanted to stop working on my dissertation. Why? Because while I was doing the theoretical sampling, doing the constant comparative analysis, I do understand that it is may iteration, di ba? It is an iterative process, ganyan. Part talaga yung constant comparative analysis. But I was on the brink of, am I doing it right? Am I able to analyze my data properly? Am I getting the right code? Am I on the right path? I was really questioning myself then. And then, I came across this, talaga yon, isang afternoon, no? And then I came across this material I mean, the book was really with me, no? But I came across with this passage from, it's actually from Sharma's. The title is Conducting Grounded Theory in 2006. It's from Kathy Sharma's. So, in-screenshot ko talaga siya for you. So, let me read. Grounded theory gives us more guidelines and yes, grounding than most approaches. This is the reason why I gave my title Getting Grounded, no, with grounded theory. Now, the highlighted part, if you could relate, no? Yet, we may still feel as though we step on shaky terrain. Perhaps we wonder if our analysis has value, no? At that point in time, nandun ako sa question na yan. May value ba yung analysis ko? At this stage, learn to tolerate ambiguity, but keep moving in the process, no? That will keep you progressing toward your goals. You'll discover rewards at the end. Learning to trust in the writing process, if not in ourselves, is like learning to trust in the grounded theory analytic process. Our writing, like our analysis, is emergent. No? So involvement in these processes can take us where we need to go. So especially for those who are writing their papers, na parang ayaw nyo na, just always learn to trust in the writing process, no? And to yourselves, learning to trust in the grounded theory analytic process. No? I think that's the end of my my presentation. These are the references that I used, and thank you for listening. Miss Kamla, I'm done.
Yes, thank you again, Ma'am Sherry. Once again, we invite our participants to drop your questions for Dr. Marasigan in the chat box. So just a thought, no, while Ma'am Sherry was sharing her lecture, I quickly remembered our experience in DevCon 393, qualitative approaches to communication research. So parang one of the mantras of our class during that time is to be comfortable with uncertainty. And just like what Ma'am Sherry said, although you are quite uncomfortable with the current data that you have to keep moving. Hindi dapat tayo titigil. So yeah, probably that's a challenge for everybody. Okay, we have a question from one of our pioneers in Pagkalinga. She's also the chairperson of Pagkalinga, Miss Patricia Ann. Kindly unmute your microphone so that you can raise your question.
Good morning. Good morning, Ma'am Sherry. Thank you, Kabla.
Good morning, Pat.
Grabe, may pa-intro yung question. Siguro I just wanted to ask, growing up in a very positivist approach, we're used to having data based on numbers, statistical analysis. And you've mentioned earlier that for us to be able to come up with a theory of our own, like building up a theory, you must exhaust all possible information and data. Will that include, like say for example, a quantitative data, like when you want to use the Likert scale and compare the population means? Will that kind of data, instead of encoding themes and categories, include in that data set that you can come up with for the theories? And yes po.
Okay.
And sorry. And how will we ensure the validity of if we use grounded theory? Because sometimes we are discouraged to use, like you've mentioned earlier, we are discouraged to use grounded theory because of the question of validity of the data. And so will you encourage PhD students particularly to engage in grounded theory approach? Thank you po.
Thank you, Pat. You're asking, parang dalawa yung questions mo, no?
Po.
Parang dalawa yung questions mo, tama ba?
Yes po.
The first question is, will you be, parang if you're going to i-mix mo with quanti and quali, ganun ba? Using like the data in Likert scale, and then you incorporate it with your qualitative data that you have. You could make use of it, actually, you could make use of that. To reinforce, sometimes that's the idea of coming up with a mixed method. I think Ms. Giselle also asked the same question. Can you recommend grounded theory approach as an effective qualitative tool for mixed method research? Actually, you could make use of it, to complement the data that you have. Going back nga kay Glaser and Strauss, they were actually yung isa was focused more on descriptive statistics. Actually, Glaser was more on descriptive statistics, while si Strauss focused on symbolic interactionism. So, but then yet they were able to work together. And the study that they were looking at noon was more on the terminally ill patients. So medyo medical yung context. So actually you could make use of it. And then sabi ni Pat, you mentioned about validity and reliability, idea of validity. Actually, yung idea of systematic research design would answer the question of validity in a grounded theory. Now, your second question naman, did I answer your first question, Pat? Okay. For your second question,
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Retention ko. Ang second question mo is, will I encourage you to do qualitative? Well, why not? No, if it's not an issue of, because sometimes the students are thinking of, I will make use of I will make use of a grounded theory, or I will make use of a phenomenological approach or narrative approach. The question, I think, would be, what is your research problem? You go back to that. What is your research problem? And then from the problem, ano yung fit? What would best answer your research problem? As I mentioned naman, if there's a theory that would explain naman your research problem, then why would you do a grounded theory? So it all boils down to your problem.
Thank you, ma'am.
But I do encourage, parang for but a lot of students are actually hesitant to make use of grounded theory because it's really a very tedious process. It's a long process, Ayun nga ang baon nyo dapat dito, patience, kasi you go back and forth. Akala mo you're done na doing your data collection, and after which meron pa pala akong kailangang i-gather pa. Because it would not satisfy the theory that would be generated from the data. Yung data ko is not enough to generate a theory that would explain the phenomenon I'm looking at.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you po. So also joining us this morning is Dr. Calalo. So she mentioned, she just commented, when I was working on my dissertation, I would always have a pen and paper beside me when I go to bed. You can never tell when a good idea would come in. So perhaps this is also mentioned during the memoing that Dr. Marasigan shared with us earlier. So
po yun. Just to susog. It's really very important. So you bring with you your pen and paper. Yun nga, hindi ka lang pwede mag-bring ng pen and paper when you're taking a bath, di ba? So minsan pa yung habang nag-shampoo kang ganyan, saka lalabas yung mga very insightful ideas,
Now from Marian De Luna of ASI, what if you use Facebook Messenger po, since this is the most accessible mode for respondents? In your follow-up questions, is it valid input in grounded theory research?
Sorry. Ulit.
So is
asking if we could make use of Facebook Messenger?
Yes, ma'am. In your follow-up questions for the respondents, so would it be for grounded theory research?
Yeah, actually, you could make use of that. If you think that the question would be answered naman through over the phone or through Messenger, especially now, with what we have, you could make use of that. Yun nga, ibang means as discussed by Dr. Dizon kanina, di ba? So a different means like Zoom, Skype, or any other means. Although if you're looking at, if you're going to complement, kasi I think what is also beautiful with the grounded theory, you're able to triangulate your data, no? If you're doing observation, direct observation plus interviews, and your own hunches, your own thoughts as a researcher, you triangulate all these things. So pwede naman yung follow through over the phone.
And I think also related to that po is the question of Sir Jenny Lapina. So in the context of pandemic, it means that we will pursue, or if we will pursue grounded theory, we are expected to have series of calls with our participants. So in the talk of Dr. Dizon, it is suggested to have only 15 to 20 minutes. Opo. So can we inform our respondents that we will have series of calls? Pwede po ba na ganon?
Pwede naman, no? We can do that. Pero as much as possible, if we can, like, yung intention naman natin is that in one sitting, hopefully, we will be able to gather all the information, the data that we need. But yun nga, in the process of doing so, siguro that's what I also learned when I was doing my data collection. I thought I will not come back anymore. So, pero, yun nga, when I was writing my paper, parang when I was analyzing, doing the constant comparative analysis, parang sabi ko, I cannot, I mean, pwede mong sulatin sana ng ganun na lang, but I cannot help na hindi ko i-complete yon because I know in my heart na hindi ko natapos yung process of getting saturation of categories. So as a researcher, ayaw mo yon . So I really, I took courage na lang to go back, set an appointment with my participant, and they understood. But then I realized, okay, the next time pala when I do interview, I need to make parang disclaimer na, ma'am, if ever po, or sir, if in case na I might be needing additional information, would it be okay, no, to disturb you again, no? So parang ganyan. But ideally, if you're able to get naman na the data that you have in one interview, edi much better.
Yes, ma'am. And related to that, can I ask also, is it possible that on the second interview, you get another set of respondents?
Yeah,
or participants?
That's also possible, no? If you think, diba yun nga, it's a constant comparative, simultaneous and sequential data gathering and analysis. So if you think na another participant na related dun sa iyong ginagawang study would be of help, then yes, you can do that.
Okay po. So this is from Ariel Delfino. Hello po, Ma'am Sherry.
Hi, Ariel.
Is there a particular technique or method for determining or deciding that no current theory or theories exist for the phenomenon or subject that we want to investigate?
Then that's where hindi yung critical role of the researcher would be in place doon, no? If you want to study a particular phenomenon, then nag-explore ka na more or less, no? If there are some theories that would explain, no? But if you think na yun nga, if you're looking at a particular process kasi, no, like relationship of ganito and ganyan, and you think there's still no theory that has discussed that, then you can proceed working on the grounded theory. Now, I think I don't know if some would be asking, no, if there will be some who will be asking about is review of related literature needed in doing grounded theory, especially that you ground your data. You ground your theory from the data. Needed ba yung RRL? So actually, even si Glaser and si Strauss, medyo din sila, may din sila doon. May, ang tawag sa ganyan? Nag-break away din sila. Yeah, meron din silang parting apart on that of that concept. Yung iba, they think na they will just gather data without any literature, no? a priori knowledge. Thinking na, okay, I will just gather the data. I will just review the literature once I have gathered all the data. However, you also need to be sensitized. I think this is the point that would answer Ariel's question. There should be some sensitizing concepts. No? You still need to read. You need to be sensitive about the concepts that you will be looking at in your study.
What about theoretical lens daw, ma'am? Do we need to have theoretical lens for grounded theory approach? Why is it that we need to make the process of analysis iterative in doing a GT? Bakit daw po pabalik-balik?
Sige, ano ba unahin natin tanong?
The first one, ma'am, is...
You need to have a theoretical frame, theoretical lens. I think this was highlighted by Kathy Sharmas. No? Yung philosophical view, especially in constructivist design, is very important. No? Where are you coming from in the first place? So, yung theoretical background, yung philosophical views natin is very, very important when we do our research, I think. No? Dun pa lang sa research problem natin, you already have a bias as a researcher, diba? So, it's very important. In my case, I followed kasi Sharma's constructivist design. My theoretical underpinning noon was on the social constructionism, no? That the participants have their own ideas of reality, and even the researchers have their own ideas of reality. So, yes, it plays a very important role, yung theoretical lens natin. Second question, ano nga ulit yung second question niya? Sorry.
The next one is, why does it have to be iterative?
Okay. Why does it have to be iterative? Because that's just how it is, no? That's how it should be. Kasi if it's not iterative, you just end with what you have, no? And as you look, I mean, in reality, when you look at your data, you do not stop with what you have, no? That's why I am telling my students who would want to do qualitative, particularly grounded theory, na they have to be patient. Kasi talagang yung proseso niya, inductive, deductive, abductive, no? It's really like that. I don't know how to answer that, but I think yun yung sagot eh. It has to be that way. Because you're trying to generate, not discover a theory, but you're trying to generate that is grounded in your data. Now, if you're not going to do an iteration, how sure are you na what you got is really really grounded from the data that you have?
Now, on a more emotional side of the research, ma'am, from Gien Garma, any tips po on what to do when we feel nauuta or na-overload na po sa data na kaharap natin, or if enough is enough?
Basahin niyo yung last slide ko, no? It really made me it really made me sane during that particular day. I don't know, it really dawned on me noon. Sabi ko, ayoko na talagang mag-isip, no? Parang ganyan. Yung term na utang-uta, exactly. Because when you are always looking at your data, day in, day out, 'di ba? Morning, pagising mo data na, bago ka matulog data pa rin. And then you wake up, you do it again. So, yeah, that's true. So you need to unwind, no? You need to read other materials, and baka as you read other materials, may matisod tayong ibang material that would help us keep be grounded pa rin of what we are doing. But I do understand it's very difficult, no? So yun lang, be careful. That's why you need some breather from writing. Because I was also questioning myself, how sure I am that hindi ako yung na-saturate. How sure am I that yung data ko, I reach the saturation ng theory, no? A theoretical saturation or category saturation. And hindi ako yung na-saturate. So I needed to reflect on that for several days, no? Like going back to the data every day. And then I rested for some days, no? Going back to the data. If it still says something to me. That's why, dagdag ko lang, in doing grounded theory, you have to be open and closed down at the same time, no? Open, you always have to be open in terms of emergent themes, no? Baka may mga emergent themes pa, emergent categories. But at the same time, you have to be close to your data always, no? So you always have to talk with your data, you speak with your data always. So you remain open and at the same time close with your data.
Yes. So there are some days that we have to part with our data,
Yes,
and
kailangan.
some days we have to embrace it. Okay, now we are also joined by Professor Lynette Carpio from College of Development Communication. She said, "Thank you, Dr. Marasigan. Very insightful talk on grounded theory." So probably we can entertain one or two more questions. Questions are still coming in, ma'am, but with the interest of time, maybe we can just
Yeah,
address
you can
two more.
send it to me. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So from Andrew Siduk of CVSU, this is how an approach should be discussed. Thank you so much po for sharing your knowledge and experiences, Dr. Sherry. Okay, a
Thank you.
question. Okay, we're still okay, a question from Sir Junard. What common topics in qualitative studies are done using grounded theory approach? What common topics daw po? Well, I guess it could be anything. The mundane, the common, the familiar, and the unfamiliar.
Yeah. That's true. Yun na yun, actually, Kamla. Exactly.
So para naman po sa mga undergraduate, do you advise daw po that undergraduate students should also pursue GTA?
Actually, magandang question yun. No? Si grounded theory, would that be okay? I just don't know, no? Sometimes kasi yung undergraduate students, yun nga, grounded theory would entail time kasi, no? Like time in doing your data collection, doing your analysis. I just don't want to justify for graduate students na we have the luxury of time, no? Na pwede tayong mag-ilang years. After ng coursework, we have a lot of time to do thesis. Baka naman, ma-inspire kayo masyado, no, to extend. Among undergraduate kasi, yung limited time that they have, no? And, but I think if they will be given enough na training then, yun kasi yun parang there has to be a certain level of maturity in doing grounded theory. But that doesn't limit yung undergraduate students. Just they need to devote time in analyzing their data and how they communicate with the data that they have. Pwede naman, wala namang limitation yun na pang graduate lang or undergraduate. But yung dedication and patience of the researcher, kung undergrad man siya or graduate, basta as a researcher, you have to be dedicated to your data and to the process also. I remember it's you're understanding a process, but you're also going through a process of doing grounded theory.
Yes. So I guess that ends our open forum for this session. Thank you so much again, Dr. Sherry Marasigan. It has been a very fruitful morning for everyone. And we hope that you find our topics interesting and useful to your current research pursuits. So may we remind everybody to please fill out the evaluation form. Dr. Mira Magkawas will be dropping a link in our chat box. It will redirect you to our evaluation form. And in return, we will give you your e-certificates via your registered email. So at this juncture, Pagkalinga, in collaboration with PHILARM, would like to award this certificate of appreciation. May we flash on the screen? This certificate of appreciation is awarded to Dr. Josefina T. Dizon for her invaluable contribution as resource speaker in Project PAGBANGON, a joint webinar series on education, research, and extension, and for sharing her insights, experiences, and expertise through her presentation titled Conducting Social Science Research During the Pandemic, Challenges and Alternatives, held on the 19th of March, 2021. A virtual round of applause, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ma'am Dizon.
Yeah.
And also, the same certificate of appreciation is hereby awarded to Dr. Sherry B. Marasigan for her presentation titled Getting Grounded with Grounded Theory, an Overview of Basic Approaches. Let's give her a big hand. Ma'am Sherry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pagkalinga.
Thank you po. So on that note, shall we have a photo op po? May we request our participants, our resource persons, and the organizers to please turn on their cameras. Okay po. So si Ate Jean po ba? Who will be taking the screenshot po? So si Miss
Pat.
Jean po. Si Miss Pat. Opo. Okay po. So Miss Pat, we're on page 1.
All right,
We have
wait lang.
2 pages.
Print screen. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Next page. 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 Okay, yun na. Thank you.
Ayan. Maraming salamat pong muli sa inyong pagdalo. So just an update po, we have 188 participants for this webinar, but we have more than 200 registered participants. And we have accumulated a total of 50,560 pesos of donation, which will help fund the medical treatment of a fellow student at the College of Public Affairs and Development for his kidney transplant. So on behalf of Pagkalinga po and PhilArm, we would like to thank everyone for their time and support. And for more updates for Pagkalinga, you may follow us on www.facebook.com/Pagkalinga. To the organizers of this event, thank you for making this virtual event possible. Stay safe, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Congratulations, Pagkalinga.
Thank you po.
Congratulations, Pagkalinga.
Thank you po, Ma'am Sherry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Po sa
Dave.
lahat ng
Thank you
nag-attend.
po.